Create a Stress-Free Life Without Burnout with Dr. Tami Berry, episode 293. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and today I have a wonderful special treat for you because it's going to be different than the typical guests that we usually have on here, which is, hey, we've got marketers, we've got technology business owners, we've got law firm owners who have been successful. But today we are going to have a doctor and somebody who previously was a surgeon, and I'm not going to give away her story, let her tell it to you. But she has pivoted into talking about stress and stress resilience, and super excited to have her on the show talking about this topic because so many of my clients and so many of the people who I meet anecdotally, I find out that even though they don't know that they're working so many hours, the reality is when you start looking at how much time you're spending in your business, you're spending 60 to 80 hours working on your firm. And then you start to wonder, like, what's going on in the rest of your life and why is everything so stressful? How do we solve that? How do we deal with it? And I'm super excited to be talking about that today and jumping into that conversation with her. So our guest today is none other than Dr. Tami Berry. Tami is the founder of Stress Mastery Academy, and she's a former surgeon, internationally recognized stress mastery expert and coach. She helps professionals and leaders overcome burnout so they can enjoy life with renewed energy, confidence, and joy. As a burnout survivor, she has dedicated her life to researching burnout and pioneering a method for stress resilience that allows you to harness the power of high-level stress to fuel lifelong achievement and success. Tami, welcome to the show.
Great. Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today. I can't wait to dive into the topic, but the first thing that we need to do is talk about this idea of you were a surgeon and you're not a surgeon anymore. I'm not wrapping my head around it. I need to hear this story. So tell us how this came to be.
Yeah, when I had gone to medical school, I actually thought I was going to be a cardiologist. I loved heart rhythms so much. I thought the heart was this fascinating organ. And then I realized I was going to have to go through an internal medicine residency to do that. And the thought of rounding that much of the day, the thought of taking that many notes, I just couldn't do it. And also just sort of philosophically, I was more inclined to not be medicating people for their lives. I was far more interested in sort of this mentality of like, see problem, fix problem, which obviously is the mindset of surgeons. And so it was a little bit of a natural fit. I found myself being really comfortable in the operating room, being able to navigate the human body in a way that I just had a natural understanding of tissue planes and organs and how things it's a little almost as if I had sort of been here before. It was very natural to me. What wasn't natural to me was that after several years of surgical training and finally coming out on my own was the external influences that were infiltrating healthcare that made me increasingly resentful and increasingly angry and frustrated. And this was a decade ago. So this was before there was this vernacular around burnout. I had no idea what was really happening to me. And what I really knew was that I was kind of destroying myself to deal with the stress and the burdens that I was carrying. It was creating so much shame and guilt that emotional pain was something I wanted to avoid at all costs because I didn't know how to entertain those emotions. Like I had never had to entertain those emotions before. And
right.
So I was drinking and I was drugging and I was numbing and I was shopping and I was gambling. I mean, I was basically doing all kinds of things that I now know are running on this dopamine reward circuitry in the brain, right? And it alleviates our pain temporarily, but actually in the end makes our painful experiences even more painful. So this is really the cycle of addiction, right? And it had played out many, many times. And I just was done. I knew I wasn't going to survive like this. And so I had to walk away. And what I thought was going to be sort of a 2-month hiatus turned into really like, oh, I'm never going back. Yeah. And I think what's really, for me, I thought for the longest time that I was the problem. And in a way, I sort of was. Let me explain that. Because really the problem is this corporate industrial cultural conditioning that we're really all a part of, that has us carrying stressors that aren't really ours to carry. So my real interest is helping people that struggle with things like perfectionism, people who are struggling, it almost doesn't, the feeling of not being good enough, the perfectionism, the constant striving, the needing to prove worthiness, the need to continue working harder and harder for the pursuit of achievement. And then we kind of we get this achievement, and then we're a little bit dumbfounded by, oh, I thought this was going to be the thing that was the key to happiness or fulfillment or meaning in my life. And so we kind of keep chasing these things. And you don't need to necessarily have any of those personality phenotypes, the stress that's taking place.
What is it?
You don't necessarily have to have any of those, because so many of us actually have those beliefs, but we don't know that we do. How we know that those beliefs are actually taking a hold of us, or that we're actually living by them, is by the way we experience stressors in our lives, right? Whether it's time, money, relationships. When we are internalizing any of those, then we are at the victim end of the spectrum of stress, right? Like we're letting stress become something about us instead of something that we're just experiencing. And what I find really fascinating about what I was learning about stress is that it doesn't matter where it's coming from. It doesn't matter if it's coming from outside of you, or if it's coming from within you, or if it's coming from your marriage or your checking account or a medical diagnosis, or it doesn't matter, because there's one common endpoint of all of stress, and that is activation of our sympathetic nervous system. And for people that maybe aren't familiar with this, our nervous system is designed, we have an autonomic nervous system, and that nervous system literally regulates every organ and every function in the human body. And there's a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system within this autonomic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, most people are very familiar with fight or flight or freeze response, right? We're familiar with what this is. We kind of understand that the adrenal glands are involved. There's a whole epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, the hormone cortisol is involved. And that those chemicals, this biochemical reaction in the body, can alter your set point, so that the more your body is flooded with these biochemicals, the more your body expects to see them. And it's almost as if, and now you're moving your set point, like the thermometer. Think of a set point as the thermometer in your home. I set the number, the mechanism, whether it's the air conditioning or the heat, whatever, it's going to meet this demand. The same thing happens in the human body. And we don't know that we're altering our set point oftentimes until we're starting to feel things like free floating anxiety, insomnia, indigestion, panic attacks, diarrhea. I'm a surgeon, so I can talk candid. Diarrhea, even vomiting, indigestion, right? So skin rashes, right? These are all headaches, chronic headaches, grinding, back pain, right? So there are so many warning signs that the body gives you that says, time out, you need to pay attention to me. This sympathetic overload is hurting me. And I would love for people to recognize that the earlier we pay attention, the better, we need our bodies. We do. These are not just vehicles to live this life. These are vehicles for us that we need to manifest the success that we really want in this life. And we can work with our own nervous system. We've got to learn how to strengthen the parasympathetic nervous system, para meaning adjacent to. It runs counter to all of the derangements that the sympathetic nervous system is capable of creating within you. You can literally counterbalance by strengthening your parasympathetic nervous system, which is absolutely required if you want to move out of this chronic stress, which really is becoming like an addiction. And we know now that you can. Mm-hmm.
I wonder, so I don't know, you probably don't know this about me, but I'm also a paramedic. And I do that. It's a hobby. I do it at, I have one shift a week at night that I ride the paramedic truck, but I occasionally pick up other shifts. And I've wondered for a while if the reason why I don't suffer in this way from stressors is because I have that. And as you're explaining this, I'm realizing that I get a lot of sympathetic nervous system energy, because when the tones go off, it's like, hyper awareness, and you never know what you're going to get on the other side when you're showing up on scene. So it's almost like that's my drug, compared to somebody else who might be drinking or gambling. Like, that's my outlet that I go to alleviate any pressures that I have in life. And that it's like, I do it because I want to help people, but like, there's a lot of ways to help people. Like, why that way? I could just donate money to charity. And as you're explaining this, I'm wondering if, when I'm picking up more shifts, and when I find myself picking up more shifts, is that because there's some stressor that's going on and I need to deal with it? So that's what I'm doing. It's very interesting.
Very interesting. But there could also be, because I think you're a very self-aware person. So let me say that human beings were designed to experience stress, right? I mean, the whole reason why we have a sympathetic nervous system is that if we weren't responding to stress, we would not have survived. This was the stress system was absolutely required for us to get to this evolutionary period in our lives as a species, mm-hmm. right? It's critically important. However, we were designed to spend a max of 5% of our waking hours in an activated sympathetic state. Research is suggesting that right now, the average human in America, I only have studies around, so in America, that we're spending 70% of our waking hours in a sympathetic activated state. This is highly detrimental to the operation of our brains and to our physical bodies. You cannot be creative, innovative if you are in a sympathetic state. It's not congruent. We're not designed that way. You can't be thinking long-term and be interested in your immediate survival at the same time. So yes, maybe some of that is also functional for you, that experience of that sympathetic activation, but I bet it's equally matched with profound gratitude for your health, your well-being. So when you compare it, when you can match that activated sympathetic state with something that goes, you're gaining so much perspective on what could possibly go wrong. I have
Mhm.
incredible respect for anybody that's on the front lines of things like that. I mean, paramedics, firefighters, because what you're seeing is so real and so raw. Like I had the luxury of like, I'm meeting you in the emergency room or the trauma bay, and or I'm meeting you in the office in the operating room. Like these are very controlled environments. I know exactly how to run them. But you guys, what you're doing, that is like hats off to you, because there is no control in that situation. But I think
Right.
that there's an incredible payoff for you, which is, wow, I've got it pretty damn good. Like, look how awful it could be.
Yeah. Well, that definitely is a byproduct as well. There's rude awakenings that we have every day. I just get to experience them a lot more than other people. And it's also something that I was able to use as a parenting tool as I raise my children, to share with them experiences. And, when I tell them that I don't want them to do an activity because it's dangerous, I can lean on real world experience to say, no, you don't think I'm making this up? I was there when, treating a grandfather for a heart attack because he was just notified that his granddaughter had died in a car accident, like that kind of stuff, is really, it really hits home, and you can use it throughout life. But I want to make this episode really helpful for our audience. And most of them are not paramedics. Most of them are attorneys. And I want to turn this around to perhaps a more practically guided conversation, because understanding the science behind it is fascinating to me. And I'm sure that it's fascinating to some of our listeners. But more importantly, how do you recognize that stress is an issue for you? Like, how does a lot of people don't even know this is happening, right? They don't even realize that they're doing something. So how do you even identify that stress is a problem? And what's interesting is that as you explained how the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems working opposite each other, when somebody joins my coaching program, the very first thing that I do is I tell them, hey, look, we got to sit and we got to plan your future. We got to figure out what is the things you need to do. There's a lot of all of that calm planning stuff that has to happen. I never considered that maybe they might not even be able to execute on that because they are so lost in the sympathetic response they're in the middle of that they can't possibly sit down and wrap their head around this, these pieces of homework I'm giving them. So it's even in me working with clients, I can see how this can be a problem. So the first thing is there a test, or there are things that we can do to identify that this is a problem, and then we can talk about what somebody can do to resolve them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really powerful question. Right now we're in the process of developing sort of an assessment that people can take that would let them know whether or not stress is a problem for them. But some of the things that I had mentioned earlier would be the things that would be your warning sign. If you're, the biggest one is like, if you're really having full-on panic attacks, you are in sympathetic overdrive. I mean, you are for sure. But other things are things like not ever really being able to sleep, right? The parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for our ability to sleep. People that are having struggles with their libido, or who are having some erectile dysfunction issues, the parasympathetic nervous system is 100% required for an erection. Things like diarrhea and digestion. Sometimes the medical community is calling this leaky gut, right? Where you're not absorbing the nutrients from your food and everything comes out as diarrhea. That's because the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for the proper function of our intestinal tract from the mouth to the end. So
that's why when I get nervous before going on stage, I go to the bathroom. Now it makes sense. I always wondered why that happened. All right. Got it. This is the TMI episode.
Yeah. I mean, the nervous system, if you want to think about it, it's sort of like the internet. or, telephone wires, across it literally, the nervous system is the master communicator for the entire body. And that's why our thoughts are so influential on our bodies, because that's being transmitted through the nervous system. And so the maintenance of our nervous system becomes critically important. So some of the signs would be like anxiety, indigestion, panic. I said panic attacks, anxiety, rashes. Some people go as far as as literally vomiting, but insomnia, headaches, right? So that's the things to look for.
Is there, if somebody doesn't have the physical ailments, like there aren't like medical ailments that they're experiencing, is there a way for them to know that they're heading in that direction? Like, what's the preceptor to those?
Persistent, almost like ruminating negative thoughts, right? When you're experiencing a shift in your personality. So for the longest time, I just would be in a mood, right? The stress had gotten to me. I would be in a mood. I would be irritable, restless, sort of discontented, sometimes angry, right? Like when you want to flip off the person who cut you off in traffic, that's not a normal human response to having somebody cut you off in traffic. I know, it's hard to believe. Or being like internally furious, right? If there's too long of a line at the market, right?
Right.
So these things aren't normal.
So look out for overreactions in your emotional response to things. And I can definitely see, that playing out at home, like being short with my kids, getting into fights with my wife, stuff like that, where there's no logical reason for it. It doesn't make any sense, but it's an indication that there's something else going on that's really eating away at me. Right.
And that dynamic also, that you're really in trouble when a mood kind of becomes your temperament. That now I'm just ornery. Now what people are like, oh, she's just like cantankerous. Like that guy's just cantankerous. He's just like, who can even
right.
Like we only put up with him because he hired us,
right.
Like, because he pays
remember
us,
the day, remember the day when they used to be smile. I used to smile all the time. You remember the time when they used to be optimistic? Yeah. So I know people like that. I never thought about, what's going on with them, but I definitely, I can think of some friends in my head, that over time they've become miserable human beings, and it's
not their fault. It literally is that the stress has altered the way their brain works. This is what I really think is so important for people to know, is that the studies show us that if we're exposed to chronic activation of our sympathetic nervous system, it changes the way our brain works. We start catastrophizing. We start consistently looking for negative events. We start preparing for negative events. We actually become so disconnected from things like love and joy that we don't experience them hardly at all. It's like our hearts have been hardened. Okay. This then puts people into a state where they feel like they're living dead. Like they're going through the motions of life. Life has become very transactional. It's a to-do list. It's like every day is just a to-do list. And they go to bed at the end of the day and they don't even know that they didn't smile today, that they didn't have a genuine connection with another person today.
Right. Well, they just have to add that to their to-do list, right?
This is right. How exhausting is that? And so what's really
I smiled at somebody. Check.
Yeah. But it really is like if we stay in a chronic sympathetic state, we literally lose our lives. We lose our life force energy that really is replenished to us on a cellular level through the parasympathetic nervous system. So there is this possibility by strengthening the parasympathetic nervous system to have renewed energy, because stress isn't going to land. The things that are really right now pissing you off, they just aren't. That is draining you of your energy. that you could then be directing towards your business, your family, your hobbies, right? But when we get so caught up in the emotional reactivity that stress perpetuates, we don't even have that power. And then people get mad at themselves, right? They're reading the mindset books. They're doing all of these strategies. They're trying to practice self-care, right? They're trying to do it right, but they've never been given the right strategic skill set to actually rebalance the nervous system, which can be done in as little as 10, like literally 6 minutes a day. It can be done.
Okay, so speaking about strategic skill set and 6 minutes a day, I was going to ask you, so does everyone who meets this criteria have to quit law and start doing something else because you left being a surgeon?
No.
What is the solution to the problem? What's the 6-step process that they can do every day that can really turn the ship around? Because I mean, it's almost like we've set the stage here to a point where it feels like you're at the point of no return, right? I've rewired my system. I've hardened my heart. The damage is already done. So,
yeah.
Is it already done? Is there a way out of it?
So the good news is the brain is highly malleable. We have learned from studies on neuroplasticity that it can be rewired and rerouted, and that can happen until the day we die. This is like phenomenal stuff. Nobody is ever stuck with where they are, is the good news. So in terms of what you can do every day, with my clients, every client gets a heart rate variability biofeedback monitor. It's a lot of words. This biofeedback monitoring
Can we
helps
just call it an Apple Watch, or it needs to be something else?
Not available on Apple yet, but there's this biofeedback monitoring system helps you know in real time that you're strengthening your parasympathetic nervous system. And all you have to do is do that for 3 minutes. And the effects of that last 6 to 8 hours. And what happens when we rebalance our nervous systems is we gain access to the frontal cortex of the brain, which is where all of our executive function lives. Our ability, the thing that separates us from all other mammals is in the cortex. You have access to that when you're parasympathetic dominant. When you're sympathetic dominant, all of the resources of your brain are moving back to the core primal structures of the brain that are interested in immediate survival. So just a little bit of work, literally in 3 minutes, you have built the networks that allow the metabolic activity of your brain to move into the cortex. It creates emotional equanimity, which means that we can process emotions with a level sort of like without being emotionally reactive.
Without getting triggered.
Without being triggered. This is a right, yes, thank you, without being triggered. And it allows us to then be fully resourced in terms of, on a cellular level, the biochemical processes that are happening within every cell that optimize it for survival occur when we're in a parasympathetic state, right? So every cell of the body is being nourished when you practice this parasympathetic state. And that these results, science has shown us that these results last up to 8 hours. What's really interesting for any parents out there is that as you strengthen your parasympathetic nervous system, it naturally improves your ability to parent. Because up until the time that children are 22 years old, it's really 25 years old in men and 22 years old in women. We need the nervous systems of our parents because the frontal lobe isn't even fully developed yet. This has been, we haven't recognized this. And as a parent myself to a 3-year-old, it is so interesting to me because now as I've been really mastering this work, when I just spend a little bit of time with my biofeedback monitor and I know that I'm in a parasympathetic state, my interactions with her are phenomenal. Our children are responding, are being regulated. Their self-regulatory capacity, so their ability to process emotions, thoughts, and feelings is dependent on our healthy nervous system.
It's wild. I have to introduce you to Rachel Duffy, who was
I
probably
was
on the
just on her
podcast just a
podcast.
couple of, oh, so you know her. Okay.
It's coming
So
out
we
this
just
week.
had her
Yeah.
yeah, we just had her on the podcast. And I mean, this is like hand in hand. Like she talks about regulating yourself in order to, in order to have a good experience with parenting your children. And this goes hands in hand with that. And you know what? It's like, why is this important for law firm owners? Well, first of all, most of my market that I'm marketing to, they are parents, and so these are real problems that they're facing, real challenges that they're having, and being able to navigate, because the having children is a beautiful thing, but it also is another stressor, because every hour that you're not with your kids is an hour that you're choosing between you and them, between your business and them. So it creates this dynamic where your law firm is at odds with your kids. It's like you're choosing one or the other, and which creates this massive amount of stress. And ultimately, we end up getting lost in the process and maybe focusing too much on one and not enough on the other in either direction, where neither looks good. The law firm is not successful because we're focusing on it more. Kids are not getting access to their parent because they're not there, or vice versa. Kids are getting the parent, but the parent's constantly worried about the business, and they're not getting the full parent in that process. So now, I mean, needing a biofeedback monitor sounds like, okay, I gotta order this thing, right? Is there exercises that go with that process of how you spend those 3 minutes that somebody can start without the biofeedback monitor and just start doing those exercises? Like, what's the thing that somebody can start doing today to try to get to that mode, and start to solve this?
Yeah. Well, this is where a lot of people have tried things like mindfulness, mindful breathing. And the problem with that is, if you're kind of deep in this chronic sympathetic activation, is that practice just kind of just lets you have greater window or insight into how crazy you really feel. And the benefit of the biofeedback monitor is it gives you something to focus on. It gives you immediate feedback on where you are, and it starts teaching you, oh, that's what that feels like. Oh, that's sympathetic dominance. Oh, that's parasympathetic dominance. The purpose of the biofeedback monitor is that you understand you. Otherwise, you're just kind of hoping that you're actually calming your nervous system. And I found, for me personally, that working with this device has strengthened my mindfulness practice, has strengthened my breathing practices, has strengthened my presence. But I had tried those things before having the biofeedback monitor and was kind of left just frustrated, wondering if I was doing it right, consumed with the negative thoughts, and becoming more aware of how stressed I really was, which for a high achieving type A perfectionist is like torture. So the other thing that I think is probably worth mentioning, because you were sharing a little bit about your audience, when we're in a state of stress, time contracts. We have less of it because the brain is then wired in a way where everything has to happen right now. You have to act fast. It has to happen now. You're surveying your environment. You become hypercritical of yourself and your body. You become hypercritical of your environment and everybody around it. And nothing can happen fast enough. So if that sounds like you, give yourself a break. Recognize, I think it's so important for us to recognize, wow, stress is running the show right now. Let me just take a few deep breaths here. Let me just catch myself. And if you can take a few deep breaths, really use the diaphragm, because the vagus nerve, which is the most powerful parasympathetic nerve in the body, runs through the diaphragm. You got to really move the diaphragm. A lot of us, when we take a deep breath, we're actually just moving our chest. Like you really want to use, you want to like push down through your abdomen, down through your diaphragm, expand your belly, take a few like deep belly breaths, just kind of settle back down and go, okay, now I'm a little more resourced. Now let me look at this again. Right. I had this interesting conversation with one of my clients the other day who was saying, after just a few, like, I think we had been working together like less than 10 days. And he's a neurosurgeon. And he was saying how everywhere he goes, like, no matter where he goes in the hospital or in his personal life, everybody had been saying, you're different. Like, there's something different about you. It's nice to see you, kind of thing. And he goes, oh my, like, how big of an asshole was I? You know, he's like,
pretty big one. But you know what? You can give off an aura when you're walking around, right? There's a certain look, like what do we call it? RBF, right? When somebody's got the resting bitch face, right? It's like, when you walk around, you can walk around with the look of death on you, or the look like you're about to conquer the world in a bad way, right? Or you can walk around in a friendly, smiley, and so it's almost like you don't have to actually interact with anybody. Just your mere presence can be a presence that's a negative force around you, or it's a positive force around you. And it sounds like it, that's the transformation that he achieved. It's not necessarily how, whether he was an asshole or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
But okay. So, I mean, this all sounds great, but our listeners are wondering two things. If I could put myself into their shoes, maybe some of them are wondering, is this a bunch of taboo? But the rest of them, right? They're wondering, like, okay, how do I get my hands on this thing that sounds like the most amazing thing since sliced bread? How do I get myself a biofeedback monitor? And then the other question that they're asking is this just a matter of having the monitor, or is there like a training I need to go through to understand how to execute and use the monitor? So how does somebody get started with this?
So two parts to that question. Number one, how can you get your hands on this monitor? They are available. The one that I like the most is through HeartMath. So it's called the Inner Balance device. Mm-hmm. Number two, I do think that it takes more than just having the device. I think working with somebody who knows the inner workings of the device, who knows what it can do in terms of creating stress resilience, because I can tell you, you don't need anything in your life to change for everything to change. This neurosurgeon did not have anything change in his life, right? Like the OR is still stressful. The client, like he's still operating on people's brains, right? The spinal cord still have to be replaced, tended to, like, and so nothing changed, but everything did, right? Mm-hmm. So stress is a lot less about what is happening around us and more about what we're letting it do to us. And when you become the master of stress within your own body, you become calm, confident, courageous, like all of the positive qualities that people are working so hard to have are actually inherent to who they are. And what we need to do is chill out, chill the fuck out, like.
Right. It's there. It's in the parasympathetic system. You just need to allow that system to take over the dominance.
And you only have to do it a few minutes a day for it to work. That's how powerful and beautifully designed we are. There is so much intelligence in this human body. You said something that was like, there's an aura. There's actually an electromagnetic field that's emitted from the human body. And when you're parasympathetic dominant, when you've built coherence, it's called coherence in your body and your system, your electromagnetic field is 3 to 4 times more powerful. You want to be an influencer, you want to have an impact, you want the income that comes with it, then you have to become the master of your own nervous system.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. So how do people find out more information? Like I'm sure that you teach them how to, you're one of these people that knows the monitor, knows how people, knows how, like, is there a way for them to learn this from you?
Yeah, yeah. You could find me at my website, drtamiberry.com. It's DrTamiBerry.com. Connect with me. I'm on Instagram, Tami Berry MD. I'm on LinkedIn under the same handle, Tami Berry MD. Let me interact with you. Let's have a conversation. Definitely.
And do you work with people one-on-one? Is it what does that assistance look like?
Yeah, I do. I have a group model right now that as a new mother, I just needed to reprioritize my own time. And I have found that my clients are getting the same, like phenomenal results from this group model. And there's so much power in hearing how other people are transforming their relationship with stress that goes, oh, wow, like now that's possible for me. I think the group model is where it's at, like all the way. I'm really active in there. People are getting continuous feedback from me. We have a team of coaches that help support people. There's modules, there's an entire training system that comes along with your biofeedback monitor. It is like, I mean, hands down, one of my clients actually came to me because he was having panic attacks that were keeping him up hours at night. And so I guess we did our interview like 10 weeks after him having started the program. And he had one that lasted less than 10 minutes. And he was saying, like, hands down, if this was the solution to my anxiety, like, I wish I had known about you like 20 years ago. Like, this poor man
Right.
has been suffering, we don't realize it's like a fish that doesn't know it's in water, because our culture is so steeped in stress, because that's the way that this is a part of our culture right now. We are so sick and we don't even know it. And I want to see people I just want to see people liberated from the suffering that stress is creating in their lives. And not only that, I want to see them use that as fuel. Like, every time you want it to be it doesn't have to be an energy drain. You can turn it, you can reframe it, we can turn it around, and you can use that as fuel so that you can show up as your best in the moments that matter most to you.
Awesome. Love it. Tami, we can keep talking all day, but unfortunately we got to bring the show to a close at some point. I really love this concept, and honestly, I got to give it a try. I got to be the guinea pig for my audience and try this thing out. But folks, if this is something that sounds like it might be a solution for you, it might be something that's going to work for you, which clearly the science is there. Tami's got the experience and the clients that have gone through this to show that it works. The only hesitation you might have is, can I find the 3 minutes to do this? Or am I really stressed out? So why don't you find out? Why don't you order yourself the device, go, reach out to Tami and join her program and see if it works. A lot of what I teach with running a business is that you just need to take action. You just need to try things and see what works. So what's the harm in trying it? Yeah, you probably need to spend a little bit of money and a little bit of time in that process. But what if it works? Like, what is possible for you if you can become optimistic, happy, loving, filled with potential? How much can you accomplish in a day if you approach every day in that form, instead of stressed out, mean, irritable, and all those other things? So I really love where this has gone and what we've covered. I always close out the show with two things. One, we already did, which is share how people can get in touch with you. And folks are going to link that up in the show notes. So don't worry if you didn't write it down. Just click on your podcast player. It should be right there in the description. If not, you can go to profitwithlaw.com and the show notes page will be right there on our homepage. the other thing is I ask you a question, which is if you had to give our audience one piece of advice that would be the most impactful to them, what would that piece of advice be?
That you're doing better than you think you are. You're doing much better than you think you are. And to give yourself a break.
I love that.
We judge ourselves so hard. We are so hard on ourselves. And when we're stressed out, it ends up being, kind of like the last straw, there's nobody more worthy of your love than you are. We've got to start being our own, we've got to be fiercely compassionate and kind to ourselves.
I love it. I'm going to start using that in my coaching calls. I just love the way that I felt when I heard you say that. So I can imagine how other people would feel hearing that on a regular basis. So definitely stealing that from you. Tami, I really appreciate your time today. I think this was an amazing interview, very different than what we usually have on the show, but I think this can really be a game changer for a lot of people out there. So I hope that they check you out. I hope that some of them see some real success with implementing this biofeedback monitor and the process to get really familiar with how to create these pockets of time for yourself to really allow your parasympathetic system to take control and it really show up in a different way on a routine, regular basis. Consistency is key. And if this is what allows you to consistently be in the right state of mind, that could be huge. So I'm really excited to see what this allows people to create when they get turned on to it. Folks, this has been a great episode. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, we have a ton more just like it. We have amazing experts that come on every week on Thursdays, but we're here twice a week. And on Tuesdays, it's me behind the microphone talking to you about whatever is on my mind at the time. Hopefully some of that is even valuable. But you get 2 shows a week to constantly tune into a barrage of content. But if you enjoyed this episode, then you will enjoy the other episodes we have. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. You'll get notified when we release a new episode, which is, like I said, twice a week. So happy to have you here. Would love to have you stay. So hit that subscribe button and we'll catch you on our next episode on Tuesday. Take care. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.